So there are 5 things that if you guys are doing it, I can guarantee that you will never get rich. And I'm not saying this to be a D-head, I'm saying this because these are the mistakes that I was making. So if you don't want to not be broke, check out this video. Intro. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's show. Glad to see all of your beautiful smiling faces. Can't really necessarily see your face, but I'm guessing you're watching this and you're obviously subscribed, so you obviously must be beautiful. I just want to welcome you to the channel where we talk about a lot about finance and things to really gain some freedom for yourself. What I want to talk about in this video are 5 mistakes or 5 things, 5 reasons why you will never get rich. And I'm not saying this, like I said, to be mean. I'm just saying this. If you understand this now, instead of later, instead of when you're 40 or 50 or 80 years old, and you already did this entire project that you're already working on working until I'm 65 and then retiring. If you look back at this moment in time and you start not doing these 5 things, then you could start gaining some success. But it all begins with these 5 little things. So the first thing, that the reason why most people, and I'm talking about you, so make sure you don't be one of these people, okay, is not planning for an early retirement. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, you know, just like retire young and like sip some margaritas on some beach somewhere in like Thailand or Costa Rica. I'm not saying any of that. The reason why I'm saying is at least plan for an early retirement, even though if you don't want to retire, is there's this law called the Parkinson's Law, okay? And the thing about the Parkinson's Law, I remember when I was in school, I was working really, really hard to become a dentist. Because remember, all the previous videos, I was supposed to be like a dentist, but that is a different story. Whenever my professor, my teacher said, oh, Mike, you have this assignment due in a year from now. I would, like, I don't care who you are, okay? If your professor said you have 1 year to fulfill this assignment, I would wait until the last minute, the last day, the night before the deadline, before I would actually do my assignment. And then I would hand it in and then I would get a good grade. And I was like, wow, that was insane. And this is the problem with most people is even if they are given a huge amount of time, we tend to not do things until right before its deadline, right? And this is the thing about retirement and financial planning and understanding how to get financially independent and live your life young instead of later is we wait until the last day of our job when we're 55, when we're 65 years old, we're like, wow, you know, I'm gonna retire. And then we start planning to live our life. But what's the point being 65, 75 years old, having the income, but not having the energy or the youthfulness or the craziness, right, to actually enjoy that wealth? And the thing that helped for me is I was like, okay, Mike, if I was gonna die at age 30 instead of age 130, what would I need to do? How can I actually increase and quantum leap my goals financially so that I can start experiencing freedom when I'm younger and when I'm still, you know, like decent looking instead of when I'm like decrepit and looking like a raisin, even though like Asians don't raisin, like how black don't crack, right? How am I gonna do that? And it's because, okay, I'm gonna start planning for earlier retirement. There's this movement known as the FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And even though you may retire early, doesn't necessarily have to mean that you can stop working. You can start doing the things that you love doing. You can start making videos. You can start sharing your journey. You can start doing the things that light your heart on fire. And that would have never happened if at 18 years old, instead of focusing on getting a good, stable job, I didn't start focusing on how can I retire early. And the moment I did that, everything started switching. My values started changing. I started realizing, wow, I don't necessarily have to do this because that might take 40 years to accomplish my goal when this could actually take me 4 years. So the moment you start changing that outlook and that focus on, okay, how can I retire in the next 10 years? And if that sounds crazy, that sounds insane, understand those limiting beliefs are normal because that's how I felt. Like if I was like Googling and YouTubing, oh, you know, how to get rich or how to make money, and I saw some kid that it's like in a cut off shirt with a ukulele, looking like a douchebag with some like name of his name behind him, I would have been like, screw this guy. What does this guy know? I would have hated the person talking because then it would be shining a light on my own inadequacies. But like I said, Don't let any of those stories affect you. Instead, just start focusing on how can you just retire early so that when the point happens and when the assignment is due of the freedom assignment, you still have the rest of your life to live. Does that make sense? You getting it? Now, this second reason, the reason why most people will stay broke their entire lives is they depend on one source of income. Now, put it this way, my mom, my dad, of course, nurse and engineer. That was their one source of income, their job. And the thing about jobs is when we have a job and we have the safety, it's almost like a warm blanket of, oh, little boy, you're gonna get like a paycheck every 2 weeks. And as long as you sit down in this little cubicle and you just like turn on your laptop, you just like type away for hours and hours building my dream instead of your own, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pay you a paycheck every 2 weeks. And the problem with most people is they think that that paycheck will never end. They think we live in this like fairy tale world where everyone is like hugs and rainbows and everyone is like skipping off into the horizon with their freaking unicorns and their fairies and their magical pixies. And they think, oh, this paycheck is gonna last forever. But let me be straightforward with you. When there is financial crashes, there are happening every 8, 10, 15 years or so. When there's a downsize of the company, and sometimes that company you're working for, there's gonna come a point where you may lose your job. Now, it doesn't matter if you are 20, 50, or 100 years old, you have responsibilities. You may have kids, you may have a brother and a sister, you have a mom and dad that's aging that you want to provide for. What's gonna happen in your life if you depend on one source of income because you think it's gonna last forever and that just gets cut? How can you provide for the people that you care about? How? I don't mean to sound so angry. I'm just saying you owe it to the people that you love to not depend on one source of income. Because if you did, imagine what it would be like looking at the person you love the most and telling them that you just can't help them out. You can't help pay the bills. You don't know how to send your kid to college. You don't know how to pay for diapers for your child. Imagine trying to find loose change in your freaking couch so that you could just pay for your kid or your future kids' diapers. There was so many times, a lot of mentors that I have, that they were in this point of scarcity where because they depended on one income and that was gone before they started their own side hustles, was when that was gone, they had no idea. They were in pure fear because they had no idea how to provide for their kids or their family. Imagine that 10, 20 years down the road. What would that be like? Stop depending on one source of income. And even if you have a job, that's fine. You could start a side hustle. A mentor of mine, he said, this is a mentor from afar. He said, oh, you want to work full-time on your wages and part-time on your profit. Because then one day when you work part-time on your profit, it will make 2 times the amount that you make working full-time on your wages. And then when you're making twice as much working part-time on your profits than full-time on your wages, you could decide if you could stay at your job or not. Or if you could just hey, I'm done. I'm just going to focus on this and continue to work part-time on it, because why should you be so serious in life? Guys, life is a game. Life is a dance. Life is all about being playful. Continue to work part-time on your profits, especially when it's making 2 times the amount when you're working full-time on your wages. So remember, build something on the side. Don't depend on one income. And start building something part-time. We have a bunch of free resources below. The third thing is not focusing on aggressively saving. Now, the movement that we are a part of, and that is trying to create freedom for ourselves, not the materialistic things of check out this Lamborghini or check out this, nice house. Not this thing where we're just buying a bunch of things we don't need to impress people we don't like. Because if you imagine, there's so many things that we buy, not to impress ourselves, but to impress somebody else that we don't even like, right? The third thing is to not focusing on aggressively saving. We get into this trap of keeping up with the Joneses of, oh, this person has a nice apartment. I need to get a good apartment. Oh, that person has a nice car. I need to get a better car. And because of that, we're literally mirroring off of each other's in our own insecurities, and we're just creating more debt for ourselves, postponing freedom, postponing a better life, postponing a life where you could live the life that you want instead of being a slave to the people that don't really respect you at a job, right? And that is aggressively saving. Ever since I was young and seeing the fact that we had no money, being raised by immigrant family members from the Philippines and not having money, right? Having nothing to my name, trading hours of my life for $8 an hour as a summer camp counselor, or studying really, really hard to become a dentist where I wouldn't pay off my debt until I'm 50 years old. I knew that I needed to save aggressively. And because of that, I was so frugal when I was young. I was so frugal. I remember like how it felt when my friends were hanging out at movies and going out to dinners, and I just felt inadequate and scared and alone and even depressed and unworthy because I didn't have the money to do that. And at first it was horrible. And if you're going through this right now and you're like, man, I want to like hang out with my friends, I want to do all these things, but I don't have the money to really have fun. Understand that saving can actually be really fun. That is, if you find a way to make more, like if you go from, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 a month and you find a way to make 5 or 10, right? Then saving becomes a lot of fun because now you have more to give to yourself. But another thing is learning what I did, and that is arbitraging value. So as you can see, by the freaking palm tree and the surfboard and the ukulele and the fact that my shorts are like disgustingly short, I'm in a tropical area in Asia. It's amazing. I get to live my dream life. There's a freaking surfboard and laser beams and lightsabers next to me. All of this, the cost of living in Asia, where I'm surrounded by a bunch of amazing entrepreneurs, where I'm surrounded by a bunch of amazing people, is a fraction of the cost of what it would be to live in a Chicago, a San Francisco, a Miami, any type of city. And not only that, but I get to aggressively save. I could save literally 50% plus of my active income that is coming in, and I could find a way to go all Jason Bourne and then find a way to just like create like offshore companies and you know, like do that route, right? And it's because I focus on aggressively save. So right now, you are be like, oh, I want to spend this money on this car. Don't. Oh, I want to spend like a couple $100s at the bar. Don't. Oh, I want to spend like that extra guacamole at Chipotle. Don't. All of that is just going to prolong the freedom that you can experience. And like I said, I'm 25 and a half years old, right? This was happening because I was frugal for a little bit, but then I was like, okay, I don't even have to be frugal. I can have some fun with it. I could go travel with Asia. And people are like, oh, but how do you do that? Don't you need a job? Don't you need a job? Don't you need to clock in a place? That's why you create a side hustle, an online side hustle that pays you part-time, and then learn when you make in dollars, you could spend in rupiah or baht or like some other like peso, right? And you can live your dream life, okay? And that's why I have fun. I spend less living a lavish lifestyle here than spending a mediocre frugal lifestyle in a San Francisco. Okay, and when you arbitrage that and you realize that we are going in this point in life where we are not just tied to a country because that is where we were born, but we are literally becoming global citizens of the world, and you go where you're treated the best, then you could have the most fun while saving the most while living your best life now. Are you guys getting this? Now, the fourth thing is becoming results oriented instead of process oriented. If you are results focused, then this is the reason why not only most people stay broke, but most people hate their lives, okay? And this is exactly what I mean. When it comes to money, money is kind of like a beautiful girl, okay? Imagine you are going to a bar, you're going to a club, you see a beautiful girl just standing over there. She's like, oh my God, like you're like, she's just doing her thing, right? She's doing her thing, and I see her, okay? If I went up to her and I was immediately needy, I was like, oh yeah, you know, I have like a watch. Check out my watch, baby girl. Oh, like you like my Mercedes outside? Oh, like yeah, I have like this really new apartment in the center of town. Like I spent like $10,000 on it. Like if I was like needy and trying to prove myself to her, she would just be like, you know, she'd be like, And the Russians would just be like, davai, 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 right? And here's the thing about that. Money, the more needy you are with it, because people are just in scarcity their entire life, it will elude you as fast as you chase it, right? If I just kept on trying to convince a girl, like, no, but like I like long walks on the beach, and like if I tried convincing her and was needy, she would just like run away, right? And that's the exact same thing about money. When people have this goal of, oh, I want to make 5K a month, I want to make 10K a month, I want to make 100K a month, right? And that's their goal, that's their goal. They don't focus on the process, they just focus on getting that goal. Not only do they hate the process, but they actually resent themselves when they actually get the goal. They feel happiness for like 5 seconds, and then they feel unworthy and inadequate enough. But then how do you change that? You become process oriented, okay? And that is getting out of your head on what you think you want and getting in your heart of what actually lights your soul on fire. Because when you fall in love with the process, like right now, we literally turn this camera on, I black out, I don't even know what I'm saying, but I'm just like enjoying the process. I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't know if you know this, but every single time I say a word, it is like a verbal orgasm that comes out of my mouth, and I'm just enjoying every single second of it because I'm just enjoying the fact of this process of creating, of sharing, of relating on what I'm currently experiencing right now. What then happens in a more like strategic marketing mind is that is what becomes attractive. okay? Because it doesn't matter if you're building a side hustle, a business, or if you're trying to just get a raise in your company or in your job. That doesn't happen from begging. That doesn't happen from being needy. That happens by becoming the person that deserves it. And you got to see what's like more sticky with like people. Is it like serious and angry and depressed? And like always serious all the time. Like, oh, I got to crunch these numbers at my job. And oh, hey, Sally from accounting. Like, I can't smile because if I smile, that shows weakness. Or is it someone that's just like relaxed or happy or not being worried about feeling like a dork in front of people because they just are in so abundance that they don't have to worry about other people's judgment. And when you do that, and when I started doing that, and I started falling in love with the process, guess what happened? I ended up making more money on accident. Instead of if I had a goal of, oh, I'm gonna make this amount of money this month, and I'm not gonna be happy until I feel that. And it's almost like you're restricting your creative muscles. Creative? What the hell does that mean? You're restricting your creative muscles. It prevents you from doing what we naturally do, and that's create, that's work in teams, and that's creating some epic stuff that are changing the world, which leads me to the fifth thing, and that is doing everything on your own. Guys, the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful people that have built the wildly most profitable side hustles are people that realize that being alone, and you can try this alone thing, and you can make some money from that, but it's gonna suck, okay? And if you don't like being broke, if you hate feeling scarcity, if you feel like you're building this side project or business or you're working at a job and you feel alone, what you want to have to understand is us as humans, we're not designed to be alone. You put someone alone for too long, they start going crazy. They start like going all mental, right? What changes is when you start working with people that fuel you up, that build you, that maybe together you could grow into it together. And the moment you realize that life isn't about me, it's about we. Life isn't about competition, but it's about collaboration. Life isn't about scarcity, but abundance. Not only will you go from painstakingly not knowing how to pay the bills, looking at your loved one, not knowing how to support them, not knowing how to do all the things that you want, to living a life where it's almost like every single morning you step in and you're just like in your dream. And that is because you went from the 5 things that are keeping you broke to changing it and doing it the opposite way of what we talked about. And like I said, that is all. Welcome to this video. Abrupt ending, outro.